We have a guest speaker, Dr. Dan Rhoda, who is the Director of Veterans Education and Training Services at Robert Morris University. After 40 years of military service, Dr. Rhoda has retired as a Brigadier General and has served many years at the 171st Air Refueling Wing, as well as our favorite encampment location, Fort Indiantown Gap. Tonight, Dr. Rhoda will share some of his military experiences, thoughts on leadership, and the importance of having a higher education.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Boy, you guys been to Fort Indiantown Gap?
Yes, sir.
Good place to be from, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
You know, what I'd like to do tonight is talk to you a little bit about the Air Force and some things, some thoughts that I have about the blend of the Civil Air Patrol and the Air Force. And also what I'd like to do is talk to you somewhat about leadership. And then I'll open up for questions. How's that? It's nice to see everybody in a blue suit. My first association with the Civil Air Patrol is when I retired. And I donated my uniforms to the Civil Air Patrol at Fort Indiantown Gap. So somebody out there, some big kid out there is wearing my clothes. Hopefully they are. You know, there's a difference between services. I'm sure you're well aware of that. And one of the things that I did, and I still do, is I do interviews for the military academies, for the various senators, from Senator Santorum, Senator Specter, and now Senator Toomey. And I remember we were interviewing a fellow one time, and in his background paper, he said his father was an Army doctor, an Army physician. And he was interviewing for the Air Force Academy. And one of the folks with me said, you know, your father's in the Army, why are you trying to get into the Air Force Academy? And he says, well, my mom said that when the Army gets money, they buy guns and ammunition. When the Air Force gets money, they build houses and golf courses. And so, you're supposed to laugh now. But in any event, our mission is totally different than what the other services are. And I had some experience for about 4 years in the Army also. The Air Force is basically a way of life. How's that? And it's a very clean way of life. You know, I was going to open up by something funny, but I don't want to, since I'm being videoed, I don't want to offend my other services because you don't know. Well, I might do that anyway. How's that? One general officer was talking about how the various services communicate. And so he called in 4 captains, one from each service, and he said, what I'd like you to do is give me a list of how you're going to handle this situation of securing a certain building. And if I may read just a little bit. The Navy lieutenant calls his master in chief. That's about as good as he gets in the Navy enlisted. He says, unplug the coffee pots, turn off the computer, turn out the lights, and lock the doors and leave the building unoccupied. The Marine Corps captain said, assemble a platoon and supplies, approach the building along 3 accesses. The captain says, bring the building under mortar and small arms weapons fire, assault the building under covering fire, sequester surviving prisoners, whatever. Now we get to the Air Force captain. The Air Force captain says, types into his laptop, contacts a real estate agent, negotiate a 1-year lease, be sure to get the option to buy. And so with that, the Air Force takes on a different approach to how we serve our country. And it's a good approach. And it's an approach that's certainly well needed. You know, I didn't know a whole lot about the Civil Air Patrol, except I knew there was a Civil Air Patrol. But it's really neat to find an organization that's older than I am. Because as you well know, the Civil Air Patrol was created when? One week before Pearl Harbor. And the significant aspect is that about 150,000 people realized that we had to protect our coastlines. Now, they assemble. And again, through acts of Congress and things, we have a Civil Air Patrol, I guess now, what, 50 or 60,000 members today. And that's growing. And, you know, and this is beyond Boy Scouts, and I know some of you are Boy Scouts and Eagle Scouts and things of that nature. Now, there's nothing wrong with that also. But I like this uniform because I'm wholly Jesus prejudiced. I'm Air Force prejudiced. You know, when you talk in terms of organizations and companies, I'm at Robert Morris. I've been at Robert Morris a real long time. I'm a college professor. You know, I spent some time in the military, active duty, and reserve. And at Robert Morris, we have a set of core values. And core values are what drive an organization. And there's about 6 or 7 of them. And if you were to say to me, Dan, I'll give you $1 for every one you can name, guess what? You wouldn't be spending any money. Because for some reason, I can't remember those. But the Air Force has 3. They have 3. That first one says, integrity first. Service before self, and excellence in all we do. Now, the Civil Air Patrol also has a set of core values. Now, and what's the first one?
Integrity.
Integrity. Because integrity is the oil that runs an organization. It's there. You know, you have volunteer service, and you have some excellence and respect and things of that nature. But guess what? Integrity is being the same on the outside as you are on the inside. Not too long ago, I heard someone speak, and they used a phrase that I really remember this phrase, and sometimes you hear things and you know, you don't remember them, but a fellow said, and we've heard the expression, walk the talk. Well, your walk has to be much louder than the talk. And whatever you do, you think about that. Because we can speak, but that's not as significant as doing the what? Is walking. And as I said, the core values that I've seen with the Civil Air Patrol and the Air Force says that's integrity. That's very important. You know, and that's a character trait. You know, and the character trait says when you have integrity, you're willing to do what you have to do when no one's looking. How many of you drive? You know what a Pittsburgh stop is? That's not having integrity. Because when no one's coming, we roll through these things, don't we? But integrity says, nah, when no one's looking, we do what's right. It's that inner voice that, you know, that makes us work. And you know, integrity is like honor. And for us to have honor, that covers several other kinds of traits that we have. And the first one's courage. The first one I have listed is courage. I was trying to brainstorm this so that I wouldn't get too boring for you, but yet send you some kind of a message that'll make you stay in the Civil Air Patrol and go on to college and join the Air Force ROTC. Except if you come to Robert Morris, then you'll probably be wearing a green outfit, because we have an Army ROTC program. You know, if you have courage, and no matter what it costs you as an individual, you got to do the right thing. When you do the right thing, you don't have to remember anything. If you're truthful and you have courage and you make a statement and someone says, geez, you said that, and then guess what? I must have, because I said it, and I'm an honest person. I also think that if you have integrity, you also have accountability. The accountability says you can't shift the blame to anybody else but whom?
Yourself.
To yourself. You know, my father used to say, if you do something wrong, guess what? It doesn't get any better than it is right now. You understand what that means? That says it can only go where? South, as we like to say. You know, it's not going to get any better. And again, you should have openness. And openness means you should have the courage to let people speak their mind. You know, how many people do you know that talk over other folks? How many of you are exposed to bulliness in the schools today? How many of you have been exposed to cyberbullying, which is the worst kind of bullying? But it's a problem. It's probably the #1 problem in the school systems today, some type of bullying. And the cyberbullying is someone who doesn't have courage, accountability. They don't have integrity because they're not open and they're not honest. And, you know, when I was looking at the Civil Air Patrol's core values, and one of the things that we talk about, and you guys talk about, is that you have to have self-respect. You ever ride in an airplane?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever ridden in an airplane? Self-respect says you're taking care of whom?
Yourself.
You gotta take care of yourself. And when the flight attendant's speaking, he or she will say, when we lose cabin pressure, the oxygen mask is gonna drop. Now, those of you who are traveling with small children, what should you do first? Put the mask on you, because if you don't do that, you can't help anybody. If you're down, you cannot help anybody. You know, and that's the self-respect. You must feel good about yourself. I had an occasion to help a student at Robert Morris, and I had to call a department head. And I said, this faculty person mustn't like students. And the department head said to me, I don't think he likes himself. You know, in Hamlet, he says, to thine own self be true. And we use expressions like, I have to face myself every morning when I shave. That's who you have to answer to. And that's what rolls all this integrity and things up. You know, and one of the things that I see, you guys walked in and you stood at attention and you waited till the last person came in and were given the order to seat. And that's, I haven't seen that in a long time, except when I visit the 171st or actually the 9/11th most recently. But one of the things that we have to have, and it's a very difficult trait, and that is humility. You know what humility means? It's the opposite of narcissistic. Narcissistic says, geez, I like me. What do you like about me? See, we can't think that way. We have to roll all this stuff into saying that, you know, you got to be good. Good inside yourself, therefore you will be good with others. And so if you think about, in my case, integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do, and your core values are blended out of this. I don't know if you knew the Air Force's core values, but they're blended into this thing. And again, the walk has to be much louder than the what? Than the talk. There's a former Air Force Chief of Staff. He says core values must guide our daily actions. And he says, even when no one else is watching. And I guess he's never been to Pittsburgh and watched us go through stop signs. But you know, as I started out by saying that the Civil Air Patrol was started in 1941, right before the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And there's a guy named Eddie Edwards. You ever hear of Eddie Edwards? No? He had a nickname. He started a nickname called Sub Chasers. And what he did was this. He chased a German sub off the coast of Delaware in the years of World War II. And he did so, and he received an Air Medal for that. And he did it as being part of the Civil Air Patrol, but when he received his medal from FDR, he received it in a Navy uniform because he became a Navy pilot. You know, as I said earlier, I still do Academy interviews for, in this case, Senator Toomey. And the senators, whether you're Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter. They look for people who have a military background and also education. And so I've been doing that. And here's a statistic that you won't believe, and maybe you know this. It says 8% of the people that are accepted into the Air Force Academy were Civil Air Patrol members. And I can tell you this, based on my experience interviewing, one of the things we look for in individuals is the fact that they are a part of the Civil Air Patrol. Because obviously, it's a Monday night, it's a school night, and you folks are here, so that shows a commitment. And if you can commit to meeting with the Civil Air Patrol, then I'm sure you're able to meet with the needs and requirements of the Air Force Academy. Okay? You know, when you talk about leadership, that integrity rolls right into it. You may read some things that says, well, management is different than leadership, if you've ever heard that. You know, management is doing things, and leadership is doing things right, and all this other stuff, where everybody will not have a chance to lead people up San Juan Hill, like Teddy Roosevelt. And so we lead in different ways. This morning I was interviewing actually a person who just retired from the 9/11, and she was a mechanic. And so she had a lot of years service also. And I said to her, I says, where were you stationed on active duty? And she said, I was at Fairchild. And I said, are you familiar with the B-52 incident? You don't follow? What are you laughing?
I was at Mountain Home.
You were at Mountain Home?
Yeah.
Well, in this Fairchild incident, there was a B-52 pilot. They called B-52 a buff, which means big ugly fella. And what this pilot was doing was he was showboating that airplane over a course of many years, many air shows. And you would see civilian home videoers taking pictures of this airplane. And I don't know, what's the wingspan of one of them? Pretty big, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, extremely big. I mean, almost, you say, geez, I wonder how it flies. And what this guy did is he rolled one over. It looked like he did a cartwheel. And he was banking very close to the ground, and he put that thing nose down into the flight line in an air show. And I use this in talking about leadership to my doctoral students, and I said, you know, whose responsible was that? Who had the responsibility to fix that? And invariably someone would say the wing commander, the squadron commander, the ops group commander. But guess what? It was anybody that ever saw that thing takes place. You know what that means? The two-striper, the three-striper, the no-striper had the responsibility to step in and stop that fellow from doing that. Does that make sense to you? So you don't have to have a lot of rank, you don't have to have a lot of longevity, you don't have to have a lot of gray hair for that matter, to be a leader. What you have to have is that integrity to stop someone who's not doing something that's, quote, by the book. And those of you that have been on airplanes know that the only way to fly is how? Is by the book. So now what I'd like to do is open it up for questions if you have some questions for me. Go ahead. Easy ones. You can sit.
Where did you start your military career?
When?
When and where?
Oh, I started it a long time ago. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
They Lackland Air Force Base. And my career, it's a really funny career. I'm retired at a very good rank, and I'm not an aviator. That's not real. In the Air Force, as you well know, you maybe don't, there's a caste system. You know what I mean by that? There's cultures and subcultures. There's pilots, navigators, and the rest of us. Is that not true? Well, I was one of the rest of us. But I was pretty smart. And I had a very good background. So I was enlisted. As a matter of fact, I was one of the first group of airmen in the United States Air Force to be trained in technology, into computers. And my first duty station was at Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert of California. I grew up in the south side of Pittsburgh. You ever been through south side? Row houses and all this other stuff. And I had a friend that says, you're going to the Air Force. He goes, they're going to stick you in some far away place. You're not going to ever see people. And Jesus, that's what happened to me, in the middle of nowhere. But what we did is we did the calculating of the X-15's flight. You ever hear of the X-15?
Yes, sir.
It was the first fixed airplane to crash outer space. I shouldn't say crash, to enter. It had about a 90-second burn. It was on the belly of a B-52, and the B-52 would drop that X-15, and it would burn for about 90 seconds. And at Edwards, they have the longest flight line in the world. It was made out of sand, hardened sand. In World War II, they used Edwards as a place to teach bombardiers how to bomb. So I did a part of a group of people who were trained in high-speed computers, and basically the job was to track, to convert the telemetry, the analog data into digital data so humans could read it. At Edwards then and today, anything that flies in the Air Force goes through Edwards Air Force Base. And around Edwards Air Force Base is the San Gabriel Mountains. And I remember, again, not being much older than you here, we saw 104s, F-104s doing takeoff and landings, touch and goes. And one guy did the touching and he went right into the San Gabriel Mountains. So he lost his life. But one of the things about Edwards was the fact that if LAX, if Los Angeles International had a problem with an airplane, they would divert it to Edwards because of that long flight. So I did that for a while. And then I actually got assigned to Lockheed in Northern California, Lockheed Missiles and Space. And at the time, we in the Air Force and Lockheed as a prime contractor, were testing the Discover missile. That's in the basement of the Smithsonian. That's how long ago that was. That again is very early space program. And I remember being a young man, and they had the military guys working weekends, so they wouldn't have to pay civilians time and a half and double time. And we would launch out of Vandenberg Air Force Base in Santa Maria, Point Mugu. And sometimes we launched what we would call a sub-chaser. So the thing would launch and then it would go right back into the Pacific Ocean. And the radar gear used to pick those missiles up in Hawaii, Alaska, and end up in Australia and make a big loop in about an hour and 30 minutes. Well, after about an hour, you figure we didn't hear from Hawaii, so that thing is where? Sub-chasing. And then I spent some time as an Army cook. So I cooked in the Army. And then I went to college. And I really wasn't into the military. But I did it, you know, served my country. And my friend said to me, why don't we join the National Guard? I said, why don't you get your prescription refilled because you're totally insane. I have to start laughing pretty soon. And then he said, come on, we'll go try it. And I did. When I was going to college, I was majoring in some type of computing field. And I was in the 171st, and they couldn't find a computer officer. And so I was just enlisted in the 171st, and they said, how would you like to get a commission? I said, I really like that a whole lot, you know. And I had a little bit of a bumpy career. I was in E4 3 times. That was my favorite rank. And the personnel director, after I got committed, now you got it, don't you? He says, you know, if I'd have seen your record before they sent you to OCS, you never went anywhere. And I don't know if you guys remember, but they would commission you based on your age. And so in time, when I got commissioned, I went to captain. And this is like a bit narcissistic on my own right, but I'll tell you what education will do for you. In 8 years, I went from E5 to lieutenant colonel. And I did it because I went to school and I did my professional military education. I'm kind of proud of that. And that's being a non-rated officer in the Air Force, which is pretty good. That's nothing that you guys can't do, except you'll get a commission a lot younger, that's all. And then again, you have to be at the right place at the right time and things of that nature. So, you know, we deployed at for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. The Air Force has a policy that says grade inversion. Grade inversion says a captain cannot work for a lieutenant, or a major can't work for a captain. And so when our unit deployed, we wouldn't have, the regular Air Force was running most of the stuff, so some of the senior folks went to Spain. We always said somebody had to go to Spain. Anybody ever been to Spain? Maroon? And we're still not there, huh? They're pretty nice there. Yeah, that's, and they flew over the Mediterranean, did in-flight refueling, so, yeah, Maroon is a, at the time was the Spanish Air Police Academy. So they were teaching young Spaniards to be security forces. And when we would leave the base to go to Sevilla or someplace like that, we'd give these kids a half a carton of cigarettes. That way there wasn't any harassment. And we gave them the other half we were coming back on base because we didn't want any harassment there either. So, that's why in my case, education was significant. But we have all different kinds of AFSCs, military occupational specialties. The idea again is to be yourself, be honest, and work. Any other questions? Anybody interested in military academies? How many applicants you think there are? Just say a lot.
10,000, sir.
No, there's thousands, yeah. How many of you have ever been to the Air Force Academy? That's significant if you want to go to the Air Force Academy as a cadet. And one of the questions we asked, have you ever been to the Air Force Academy? And the yeses get a little bit of point there. You may not know this, especially for you younger guys, is that the Air Force Academy, and girls, the Air Force Academy has a summer institute. Did anybody do that one? Did you ever apply?
Yes, sir.
Yeah?
I got rejected.
Huh?
I got rejected from the summer seminar, sir.
That's a good one to get into. The other services have them also. So if I were you, I would not just apply to the Air Force. I'd do the Navy, the Army. And I'll tell you the best kept secret. The best kept secret of academies, there's two of them. One is the Merchant Marine Academy. Merchant Marine Academy, you get a, I guess, pretty close to $500,000 education today, and you don't have any obligation. So you don't have to go to the service. If you do, you can pick your service. Another one is the Coast Guard. Except the Coast Guard only has about 46 or 47,000 troops, so that's a real tough one to get into. But when you apply to the academy, if you have any interest whatsoever, I'd apply to all of them if you could. And the significant thing is to do the visits. You know, you compete. When I graduated high school, I was 26th in my class. Think that's good?
How many were in your class?
There was 45 of us. What do you mean no? What rank are you? 26, that was 45. Some of us are late bloomers. That's just so you didn't do well in high school, you're not doing well, you still have a chance. Went to a small parochial school, and that's all we did. But being exposed to people in the military showed me the value of education. And that's what I pushed. And I went to school on my GI Bill. Just like a lot of people are doing today. At Robert Morris, we have over 250 veterans attending college there. We have about 5,000 students. To give you an example, Pitt has about 500 veterans. And Pitt has about 45,000 students. So we are a very, very veteran-friendly school. I'll give you an open invitation. If you want to come over to Robert Morris, I'll show you the. Come in the summer, and we have an 8-passenger golf cart. And we like to drive that thing over the hills, and it's like flying everywhere. And I'll show you what it's like to, no, I can't say that. I'll show you the Veteran Center and give you some ideas. How's that? Any other questions? You sure? Go ahead.
You said you were in the technology aspect of the Air Force. Now, has it been, over technology over the years, has it been fun or frustrating watching new things?
Depends on your attitude. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
Can it be frustrating? Yeah, certainly it can be. Anybody have a computer? Do they work all the time? Sometimes they get slow, you know, sometimes. My computer still can't spell. You know, it still types errors. You have to put all in perspective. Yeah, but can it be frustrating if you let it get to you? You're taking a class now, sometimes it's frustrating. Yeah, without a doubt, but you have to be able to balance that stuff out. You know, you have to be able to put it in perspective, as they say. You can't let it drive you, and that's what's important. Oh yeah, a lot of times. It frustrates me now when I'm showing students something and it doesn't do what I'm supposed to be showing them. And students laugh a little bit, you know. It's like, you ever have a teacher that the tags up in their shirt? You laugh at them? Oh yeah, look at it, you're laughing now. Mine okay? Yeah, I had someone check it before I come in here, I know that. But it happens, because we're all human beings. Handle the stress. Any others? Go ahead.
Why did you choose to retire when you did?
What's that?
Why did you choose to retire when you did?
Why did I retire when I did? I retired because I had enough. Is that a fair answer?
Sure.
You know? I retired because I also didn't want to hold anybody else up. How's that? So I did my share. God was very good to me. The Air Force was very good to me. The Guard was very good to me. And I thought, it's time for me to go. It was tough. You know, when Norman Schwarzkopf retired, he cried, you know that. Yes, he did. And one of those reporters says, Norman, I see that you cried. And he says, you know, I would never trust a man who couldn't cry. Think about it. Leadership is built on relationships. That's what it is, it's relationships. And the fact that you can do people to work with you without ordering people, although there are times you have to. But if you're in the Air Force, most of the time you're not dealing with foxhole type decisions. You know what I mean by that? You're in a situation where it's not going to be life or death constantly. And so if you get people to build a relationship with people that will function for you in a pleasant environment, that takes the stress off. That no one comes to work in the morning saying, I wonder who I can upset today. You know, my job today is to make everybody mad. I mean, they definitely need your prescription refilled if that's you walking in. And so that's what happens. There's a point in everybody's life where you get to that and say, okay, I had enough. Is that a good enough answer?
Definitely sure.
Want me to make one up?
It's fine.
That's fine, yeah. You have enough. And, again, also the fact that there was people behind me. There's people behind me. At least in my thoughts, I had none. Plus, for 4.5 years, I drove the Fort Indian Town Gap. And I was on the turnpike when there were landslides, freezing rain, snow, all different kinds of things. And I think that was enough also. Go ahead.
Sir, how were you chosen to become a brigadier general?
Well, in the military, Air Force and the other services, they have professional military education. And on the officer side in the Air Force, there's squadron officer school for captains and below. Then there's Air Command and Staff College for basically majors and lieutenant colonels. And then there's a couple of schools after that. National Defense University, the Air War College, the National War College. So one of the things you have to do is have that professional military education. Probably a minimum was a master's degree. And I was lucky I had my doctor's degree at the time. And I did a good job. And that's why I was selected. But you know, let me tell you something. A person said to me, you're in this position, not what you did in the past, but what we feel you can do in the future. And that's pretty important. It's not what you already did. It's what we think you can do. And I treated them 4.5 years before they kicked me out. No, I tricked them. Any others? Go ahead.
I didn't recall you saying, did you join CAP whenever you were younger?
Did I join?
Yes.
Yes, I did. I joined the service, and I remember being in active duty for about 18 months, and my mother says, you know what, you got your draft notice. That's when they had a draft. I says, Mom, don't worry about it. They're 18 months too late, because I was already in. Yeah, well, I came from the south side. My father worked at J&L. There used to be a steel mill from Hazelwood all the way to Aliquippa, if you've ever heard of that. And growing up, our choices were the military or what we call J&L University. And a lot of us picked the service because we were able to see some things. So,
So was this what you had wanted to do when you were growing up, or did it change over time?
I think I wanted to teach on that side of my life. Stay in the service like I did, no. I really didn't want to, but I did, you know. Obviously, I'm glad I did, and then you get acclimated. It's not as bad as I make it sound. I'm being a little bit humorous. I'm trying to be a little bit humorous there. But it was a good experience. And what the nice thing is that the one nice thing about the Guard and Reserve, this is like a public announcement, and that is when I speak to people like your age, I say, should I go to the active service? Now they're pretty competitive in any event. So, you know, if you go to the Guard and Reserves in about 6 months or so, you're coming home. Because if you don't like it, guess what? You're coming home. And you'll do the 1 weekend a month in summer camp. But if you sign on for 4 or 6 years in the active service, guess what? You're going to be there for the most part unless you get some type of general discharge. So, but I went active, and I'm glad I did. And I'm glad I went to the Guard, and I'm glad that I had the ability to work with a lot of fine people. Fort Indian Time Gap, it was more of a, we use the expression, it was a purple outfit. Purple means it was a blend of Air and Army. And so I had the opportunity to work with a lot of soldiers. And I had a little bit of an Army background, so I could relate a little bit. So. But the idea is not to be a jerk, to be colloquial with you, and to build relationships, because it's so important. You know, you never know when someone's going to say, hey, remember, you don't want to put your head down. You know, you want to be able to walk with your head up, and that's very important. You know, especially when you're in a command position. You have to be honest. You have to have integrity. If you're devious in any way, then you're in trouble. We had the problem at the 171st with a full colonel who's probably going to go to federal prison because he took advantage of his rank. And that's the worst thing you can do. And it was in the Post-Gazette about a month ago, and it's going to get re-released again. You know, that's how they say, remember when no one's looking? Well, I guess he thought everybody wasn't looking. Any other questions? Go ahead. You have a question?
Me? I'm sorry, I thought that was him behind me. What was that general doing that he lost all of his privileges and is going to go to federal prison for, sir?
No, it wasn't a general.
Oh, sorry, sir. Who was it though?
No,
Oh, colonel?
it's going to happen.
Oh, why though? What was it that he did?
He misappropriated funds.
How is your recruiting for your Army ROTC at RMU? Is it like do you guys
Well,
do a lot of sections and stuff?
there's something called the Three Rivers Battalion. The battalion is about the size of a wing, and that can vary, but the Three Rivers Battalion commander, so Lieutenant Colonel, he's stationed at Pitt. They're assigned to Pitt. Robert Morris is a subset of the Three Rivers Battalion. And there's also another one at Franciscan University of Steubenville. And so we probably have 12 cadets at Robert Morris. But they, and again, belong to University of Pittsburgh. But we, in my office area, we have a full-time ROTC instructor. He's an Army active duty captain. And we have an Army Guard, I guess he's an E6 now. So, but if you would like to come to Robert Morris and you would like to be a part of the Air Force ROTC, Pitt houses the Air Force ROTC. And we have 2 Air Force ROTC cadets at Robert Morris. And we're able to manage their class schedule to make their meetings at the University of Pittsburgh. So we're very military friendly. You know, well, I didn't do that here with presentations, but there's 8 little words that I like to use. That's, if it's to be, it's up to me. If it's to be, it's up to me. And that is, if you have a desire to go for something, you should work at it. If you're interested in the Navy or Marine Corps, then that ROTC program is housed at Carnegie Mellon. Now, being very honest with you, the ROTC does offer scholarships, but they're a bit competitive now. And what they're looking for, people who are, the operative phrase today is STEM. You ever hear the expression STEM? Science, technology, engineering, and math. Now, that doesn't mean we don't use history majors or psych majors. It's just that they're given the scholarships at those kinds of people. Matter of fact, the last 3 scholarships the Army gave it to the Robert Morris folks were a couple of girls and a guy majoring in nursing, which falls under that umbrella. So that's where it is. But you can get the money, and what it does, it's going to college for nothing, which is not a bad deal, but you have an obligation. Coming out of the Army ROTC program, you have a choice based on your skill, your career field, of going active, going guard, or going reserve. And talking to someone who's going to graduate in May, she has an assignment as a National Guard officer in Ohio. So the Army's a little different. You have to pretty much go where there's a need. Any other questions?
So why did you choose to become an airman rather than a soldier or a Marine?
No, smart. I already read you the history there. The Air Force says call a realtor, buy the building, and get an option. You really want to know the truth? I was going to go to the Army. My father was in the Army. That has a big influence on what you do. Except I wanted to go away faster than the Army could. And the Army recruiter was doing me a favor. So you go to basic training, and then you go to your MOS school, your specialty school. And there was a gap, maybe about 30 to 45 day gap. And he says, in that gap, you will probably pull KP, which is a dying thing anymore because we don't have per se KP people. There's contractors. He says, you're better off waiting to go to basic training where you don't have a big break in between going to the specialty school. And time waits for no man. And when I had this thought in my head, I went to the Air Force recruiter. He goes, yeah, you go about a week and a half. Did all the stuff, did the physical, and on an airplane. So that's the reason I. But if I had it to do all over again, I'd have joined the Air Force. Yeah, because it did wonders for me. It exposed me to people who were STEM kind of people. You see the value of an education. You know, I've been in higher ed most of my life. I've been at Robert Morris more than half of my life. And when you have children, the hardest thing to do is counsel your own kids. And you're better off giving them to a stranger because I have 4 kids, 3 daughters and a son, and I'm the last person they came to. Although they did some tokenism, but not per se. So listen to your parents. Any other questions? I hope I see some of you in a military academy interview. If you say you spoke to my Civil Air Patrol, I'll give you a couple of points. We play that once in a while. But typically, the scoring sheet is subjective and it's objective. So look at your SAT or ACT scores for whatever reason. They look at your GPA. And in some schools, they use class rank. Most schools are getting away from class rank today because it puts you at a disadvantage. And what I mean by that is, if you go to Moon, what's your graduating class in Moon about?
250, sir.
350?
250, sir.
250? So let's say you're 10th out of 250, or the upper 10%. And then you may be competing against someone that goes to Rima Christian Academy, and there's 12 in the graduating class. Last November, we interviewed a person who was homeschooled. And I said to her, and what's your class rank? Went right over her head. And I didn't do that to be facetious. I did it because I wanted to see her respond. And she probably was saying, jerk. Because being homeschooled, she was like number one. If there isn't, maybe she was last also. You know, but see, the academies look for well-rounded individuals. So I would ask you a question. I ask this question all the time. I said, what do you need from others to be successful? Think about this. Do a little assessment. What do you need from others to be successful? Invariably, you get support, communication, friendship, things of that nature. That sounds real good. And then I asked, what makes you a pain to be around? What makes you a pain to be around? And then they snicker, like some of you are. But that also tells them they have to do what? Do a self-assessment again and be big enough to say something. Now, someone probably taught you, you take that negative, you got to make it into a positive somehow, right? But they'll say, I'm impatient, or I'm a perfectionist. And I said, how about a BSer? Negative, right over their head again. So you need more people who can think through themselves. Because when I asked the question, what makes you a pain to be around, I'll bet you most of you were thinking about that answer. So if you do interview, you should have like 2 lead questions already answered so that you can do very well. But again, the military academy is looking for well-rounded people. You ever hear of Upper St. Clair High School? They probably about 350 in their graduating class. And we interviewed the #1 kid in the class. #1 kid in the class. We didn't think he was officer material. We just did not think he could motivate people. Or better yet, create an environment for people to be self-motivated. We just did not have that good feeling about him. And so even though his scores were #1, we didn't pick him. And we indicated on the response, this is why. So because you're not a 4.0, or now, geez, you see them now 4.6. I had like a 2.4. I said, you lapped me. You know? It doubled me. But here I am interviewing you, which puts it all into perspective. If it's to be, it's up to me. You can't take no for an answer. And you can't let a door close in front of you. You look for another door. That's significant. It's easy to say, geez, the heck with it. No. The tough one stays with it. Any other questions?
You said, sir, that whenever you're in the interview, they look at your GPA. I've heard like a lot of different people describe like they use the weighted or the unweighted. What do you prefer, like a weighted or an unweighted?
I prefer you coming in and being the best that you can be at that particular 15 or 20 minute interview. You know what I mean? They were talking at Robert Morris, one of our veterans, had a problem with the faculty. Now, this is the honest to God's truth. And she says, I don't give A's. Well, this guy was 4.0, so apparently he's had some. But she said she don't give them, and she graded appropriately, so they couldn't earn an A. Now, when you're looking at a transcript, it doesn't show whether you had the hardest faculty in the school or the easiest faculty in the school, does it? I mean, you might have picked easy courses with easy faculty. That does not show on a piece of paper, does it? What shows is when you're sitting in front of a guy and a girl interviewing you for academy, and they ask you, well, what makes you a pain to be around? And you can come up with an answer. An answer that's not a BS answer, it's a legitimate answer. That's significant. That's the subjective part about it. I mean, anybody could be, no, not me, but somebody you're probably 4.0s now. Are you?
Yes, sir.
Oh, Jesus. You take art faculty? No, I'm only kidding.
A little bit, sir.
A little bit, yeah, but that matters. Now, the weighted are for the advanced placement courses. Some schools don't have advanced placement, you know that. Some schools, kids graduate out of an IB program, International Baccalaureate. And that's not a real easy program either, you know that. But it's how you carry yourself. It's the impression you make. It's the fact that you look at people in the eye. Now, you can't look at people in the eye more than like 4 or 5 seconds without turning your eyes away, because you would end up being smacked in the head or something. But that's true. That 4 or 5 seconds is about it. Go to the mall, do that to somebody, and give me a call when you get bandaged up. But sincerely, you have to have that air about you. And you have to look like you want to do it. You have to be enthusiastic, you know. You have to say, hey, I want to do this. And, you know, I had mentioned that some people go to the Air Force Academy or the Naval Academy, West Point for a summer institute. And, you know, you can't put 16 ounces of root beer in a 12-ounce glass. Basically, they have a number. And once they hit that number, that's it. But I think if you have any interest whatsoever, you should go and visit the place. Whether it's West Point or Annapolis or the Air Force Academy, so that you were there. People say, I've been to the Air Force Academy. And what most people would say is, what did you think of the chapel? And anybody been to the Air Force Academy? What do you think of the chapel? You go, whoa, huh? It's something you don't forget. And then they look at you, and I can't prove that you were calling your mother. But it's something that really takes your breath away, because it's a beautiful place. You know, it's multi-dimensional, denominational. That, you know. Any other questions? The only thing I can say is be yourself, because that's what's going to happen anyway. You know, and be willing to don't let the stress get to you. Go to suck some stuff up and, you know, look the other way sometime. And then look at the end. And I think that's the hardest thing for people that are your age. That is to find out what you want to do. And I believe that finding out what you don't want to do is just as important as finding out what you do want to do. Now, I know your parents, if they're helping you go to college and you end up being an accounting major, and then you say, I'm not going to be an accountant, I don't like that, I'd rather be a history major. Oh boy, they're not going to like that. But what I'm saying to you, that's okay to change careers. It's okay to find something that you do not want it to be your life's work. And you know, it's like baking a cake. If you want a chocolate cake, you have to decide whether you want the chocolate before you put it in the oven. Because once you get it out of the oven, it comes out being yellow. You're going to have to doctor it up with chocolate icing or something, because it's too late then. So if you get yourself somewhat of a goal, the goal doesn't have to be a compass. It could be something in between. It doesn't have to be a navigation system. But I think you have to have yourself pointed in some direction. I think being in the Civil Air Patrol is a start. It's a very big start. We never had anything like this my growing up, and I don't know about anybody else. But I think there was a unit at the Allegheny County Airport at one time. I don't know if they're still there. Are they? But again, it's 50 or 60,000 cadets. That's a lot of people. I I mean, think of it, you guys have over 500 and some airplanes. That's not a bad Air Force, is it? No, I mean, that's a lot. You know, your first responders, I know that after 911, you guys, the Civil Air Patrol did the first fixed airplane ride over top of the buildings. Ground Zero, yeah. It was a Civil Air Patrol airplane that went over that. And plus, you see all this stuff about people being lost in the forest and glaciers and all this other stuff. It's really something that you should be proud of, being a part of the Civil Air Patrol. You know, and I think in my eyes, in my selection process, you get a benefit for being in the Civil Air Patrol and someone that just came in because their parents sometimes say, geez, you ought to try to do this. And that comes out. See, we ask what, that comes out. We ask that question. What do your parents think about this? And you go, well, the easy answer is my mom's not too excited. Okay, that's a gimme. But usually the next thing is, she acquiesced. You know. Any other question? You sure? I'm at Robert Morse. If you have any questions, Mr. Finnegan will get a hold of me, or someone will get a hold of me, and you have an open invitation to come over. How's that? Thank you for having me. This was pretty enjoyable. Not that I didn't think it was going to be enjoyable, but I'm glad I came. Okay, thank you.